Monday night, 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. Draco Sports and Pro-Am Belts, along with MMA Madhouse, can only mean one thing inside the Asylum. With me, Jason London. I got kicking it with me tonight. I got H.R. Baker and Waylon. Carl's working the board. Man, super excited. Fellas, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Jason, how's it going, man?
Good, man. How are
Super
you?
excited for this interview tonight. Super, man. I mean, this guy's a legend, and I've kind of followed him through his career. He goes back pretty far, and, yeah, super excited, man.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, same here, man. I mean, you know, he's like what JR said, super legend, former UFC champion. He's fought Matt Hughes I don't know how many times, you know, even has a win over him, fought Anderson Silva, Sakuraba. I mean, I'm super pumped. This is like a birthday present for me right now. You know what I mean? So,
and who you guys are talking about? We have UFC champion Carlos Newton tonight to talk about our next installment of the UFC Reebok deal, as well as the Ali Act. So it's going to be pretty interesting, man. We've kind of been on a run with the guys who are instrumental in these legal proceedings. So it's kind of a cool aspect and a cool outlet to be able to talk to these fellows. So tonight we have Carlos Newton on to talk a little UFC, a little Pride maybe, because I got some I talked with Gary Goodrich a few years ago, and he gave me some stuff regarding Pride, so I want to kind of follow up on that. Also, we got we're going to kind of step away from the MMA realm for just a touch. We're having King JB on. I'm not sure many of you who follow me know that JB and I used to do another radio show through MMA Madhouse, and he's since branched off and done some other stuff. And he's actually hiking the Appalachian Trail right now, which is kind of crazy. So we'll break in and hopefully talk to JB on the trail. We're going to do that a little bit tonight. We're going to do a little bit of UFC talk, maybe not a whole lot of UFC bashing because we got some special listeners this evening.
Yeah.
A little bit of local MMA. And before we get going, I just want to wish Waylon a happy birthday today. Today is his
thank you,
birthday.
Bro.
And
happy birthday, Waylon.
A happy birthday from all of us, MMA Madhouse and Inside the Asylum. So, happy birthday,
This
my man.
is a birthday gift itself, man, talking to a legend like Carlos Newton, so this is great. I'll always remember this, for sure.
Yeah, man. So, before we get going, real quick, we got Carlos coming on in just a second. I don't know if you guys heard the news just before we came on the air that Diaz was suspended 5 years for his positive drug test. You guys see that?
And just for, like, marijuana, ain't that ridiculous? I mean, it's not like he's taking performance enhancement drugs and destroying people. He's just smoking weed, you know, and they're taking his purse away from the Anderson Silva fight. That's ridiculous right there. That's just they're ruining his career, pretty much. There goes Nick Diaz's career.
Yeah, for sure. But we'll talk about
I think it's pretty steep. I mean, that's kind of silly when, you know, most all the states are legalizing it anyway, and he actually does have a marijuana card, and which I know is illegal in Nevada, but you know, 5 years. Come on, just talking 25 years ago in Missouri, you get caught with one.
And not only that, they're taking away
from
from his money. If I was him, which I'm not, because I'm not a badass like he is, you know, but that guy, if I was him, I'd just go fight, you know, in other organizations, probably in a different country, get away from the, you know, Nevada Athletic State Commission. I mean, I'm pretty sure they ain't got no jurisdiction over in other countries. You know?
No, for sure they don't. And you guys, I don't mean to cut you off, but we'll definitely talk about this later on after the show, after we talk with the guests, because there's a lot of stuff to talk about. But let me tell you what, man, I'm super excited to have this opportunity to talk to former UFC heavyweight champion and Pride fighter Carlos Newton. Carlos, how are you this evening, my friend?
I'm good, guys. I'm actually former welterweight champion.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I knew that. I apologize.
Straight up legend.
Don't worry. How you guys doing?
Pretty good, man.
How you doing, Carlos?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. Got my little guy. He's buzzing around the place. So you guys might hear someone punch the phone or something.
How old's your little guy, man?
He's 3. 3 years old.
Yeah,
and he's
he's
rocking.
I got a little 3-year-old too, my man. Listen, I'll tell you what, they say the terrible twos. Screw that. You got the terrible 2s, 3s, and halfway into 4s. So I got my hands full with my guy too.
Yeah, no, they're bossy too, man. They hit harder than you think.
Do you think he'll be in the Dragon Ball Z like you are?
Oh yeah, he loves Dragon Ball. Yeah,
That's awesome. That's awesome.
My
little girl loves Dragon Ball Z too.
Yeah.
Carlos, thanks for joining us tonight, man. I got a lot of stuff to talk about, but I mean, we're just going to get right into it, man. I mean, another installment on the UFC Reebok deal, the Ali Act, and just kind of want to pick your brain on that. I want to pick your brain on some MMA stuff. We'll go off topic a little bit and stuff too, but first, let's just get right into it, man. Let's just address the 800-pound elephant in the room. Give me a little bit of a background on where you stand on everything that's been going down with the lawsuit and the Ali Act.
Well, in terms of the lawsuit, it's going through its paces. It's a step-by-step process, and I'm a very patient guy, and I just go about my daily routine as this all plays out. But I look forward to a day where we have a real sport, that's based on actual competition and not someone's whims and dictator-like attitude, and a sport that's based on actual real commerce and capitalism, the ability to reap what you truly deserve and earn what you win.
How did you get involved with the lawsuit and with Rob and the whole works? Can you kind of take us through that the beginning stages for you and kind of how this all came to be?
With a lot of guys, it was just something that I'm like a lot of people out there. We knew something was wrong. We know something's currently still wrong. And, just with a little bit of, reflection, I finally one day put the pieces together and was actually able to put my finger directly on what the issue is. Rather than just have a sense about it, rather than just have a gut feeling or, a sense of frustration where, there's nothing that can be done. I basically said, no, there is something wrong here. I'm going to take the time, look into it, and see what it is. See it for what it is, clearly. And once I was able to do that, I was able to recognize in Rob the same thing, the same level of awareness on the issue. And, that's basically, to really sum it up, when the pupil is ready, the master will appear. All that means is, when it comes to a certain thing, there's enough awareness in you to recognize when somebody else has greater awareness in that topic. And for me, Rob Macy was that guy. And, we talked, and it wasn't really we talked. He said, okay, tell me what you think. He listened, and after I was finished, he basically said, you're right. And we just took it from there.
What was that eye-opening, that aha moment for you? Was it just you've had enough of the hype train and just selling you what they want to tell you and things like that, or was there something that specifically in your heart of hearts you believe that this is just not right?
It really came down to it when I realized, and this is something really, that at the core of being a fighter, a certain degree of liberty, a sense that you are truly the master of your own destiny. And in this sport, to me, it became very self-evident that was just not the case. Yeah. And then I realized, maybe this is just purely a form of entertainment dressed up to look like a sport. And basically, I looked at wrestling and made some comparisons, and I realized this is exactly the same. We actually just kind of fight for the sake of fighting. We go in there, we beat one another up, and after it's finished, we kind of just let the dust settle and kind of see, what's next? Not really see, but wait for what's next. It's not like, being a boxer or some other athlete where when you win, you know what's next. And nothing but up.
Exactly.
Whereas with this sport, you will win your fight and you'll be like, am I going down? Am I going up? Am I going sideways? Am I just going to stay here for a year? You're just, there was such a huge amount of uncertainty that I said, this does not feel like fighting anymore. This does not feel like sport. I feel like I'm just beating up some guy or letting some guy beat me up for the hell of it. And I said, no, I'm going to fix this.
That's a prophecy of what's happening today, really. I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, like last week I saw a slugfest happen, and I'm pretty sure there's fighters not going to be getting paid near as much money as the entertainer, like, let's say, Conor McGregor, for instance. I mean, what you're saying is exactly right. It's entertainment no more. It's not about, like what you said. If you're going to fight somebody and you win, you're going to be getting up there in the ranks. Now it's not like that, and it's really it's hurting the fighters big time, especially whenever they put on the wars that they do, And
a lot of the guys are just too young. They're too caught up in in
the hype,
what their next fight's going to be, in order to really stop and take account and take a moment and think, what am I actually doing? Where am I actually going?
Carlos, this is H.R. Baker, and you started out in the UFC 17, and then you went on to, you fought in 31, 34, 38, UFC 40, and 46. Was it the same on all them UFC fights, or could you tell that the UFC was changing by each event that you fought in? And has it gotten worse? Is it the same since you fought in the last UFC 46, or is it just continually gets worse and worse?
Well, one of the things I came to realize was that the way the sport was set up from the beginning, it was pretty much fixed or rigged to create a monopoly. And over time, the monopoly just gained momentum. And the sport in the beginning, before the market forces were completely non-existent, before any one promoter established a brand where they could restrain athletes with that brand, there was some degree of lateral movement, in your career, or some degree of upward and downward movement that could really be, attributed to your performance as a fighter. But at some point, as particular promoters started to establish their brand, and other promoters just died off, because the way the sport is structured, you got to understand, it inherently leads to a monopoly. It inherently creates a monopoly. Kind of like, like the NFL inherently is a monopoly. There is no competition to the NFL. The sport over time just got worse. You could feel, for me at least, I could feel the air being sucked out of the room. I basically said, you know what? I'm going to have to divide my resources very differently. I spent, I started putting less of my own future on the line when it came to the sport, and started to realize, you know what? I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do after this. I gotta have something to fall back on. Yeah, I could make $1 million as a fighter, and and so forth. But at the same time, I also said, you know what? Even after that, there's no future for me as a promoter or a trainer in this sport without bending over backwards for some other guy. I really just said, I gotta find my own path and have control of my own destiny. And I basically started to say, you know what, I'm going to do that. But at the same time, I realized I worked really hard to build this sport, and I realized something too. Watching guys like Oscar De La Hoya, Mayweather, like I'm a huge boxing fan, and just a huge sports fan competitor in general, mostly of individual sports, mind you. But I basically said one day, it dawned on me that, wow, future champions are made by previous champions. And I said to myself, I should have that right. I should have that opportunity to put my experience and resources into another up-and-coming athlete, and again reap the rewards that I am just deserved, that's due to me. And I realized, even if I just walked away from the sport, from competition, that alone too would be taken away from me. And I said, this is not just a pursuit by me, but for many athletes, and I'll tell you, fighters in particular, it's not just one pursuit by one person. It's actually a generational pursuit. And you see guys like Mayweather, he's built on that legacy that his father, Floyd Mayweather Sr. and Roger Mayweather built up. He just basically, he's the culmination of their experience and their lives. And I realized, even the way MMA is structured, they have taken that from us. Like, for example, you think Randy Couture's son can really go into the US to mixed martial arts and reap the full benefit of his father's experience that would be passed on to him? No, he would be robbed just like his father was robbed.
Yeah, they didn't give him a fair shake as soon as he went in MMA or went in UFC.
Yeah. And that's it. I basically said, you know what? This is not just about me, but this is about my own family, my own students that will see me teach their martial arts, and maybe at the end of the class come up to me and say, hey, sensei, I want to be a professional fighter. How am I in good conscience going to say to them, you know what, I'll train you, knowing very well what I would be leading them into if I didn't do something about it.
You know what, Carlos, I was just going to ask you that almost very question. How do you, in good conscience, basically pass the proverbial torch to these guys? If you're going to, if you're kind of leading these guys to slaughter, basically, it becomes a popularity contest, what have you done for me lately contest kind of thing. You speak out against the product, and then you become pushed to the wayside. So in this whole grand scheme of things, what do you want to see happen at the very end of this? When you lay your head on your pillow at the very last court hearing, what do you want to look back on this and say, we've accomplished that?
I want free, open competition like they do in all other sports. I want the sport to be a real sport. I want the anti-competitive restraints. I want the market to do its own thing. And I want there to be competition. I don't want there to be a conflict of interest like there is right now with the promoter and the athletic commission. The athletic commissions are in a huge conflict of interest. I don't want there to be a conflict of interest like there is between the manager and the promoter. The managers don't actually work for the fighters. They work for the promoter, because if they don't acquiesce to some of the promoter's demands, they won't have access to that competition for that title. And if your athlete can't compete for the title, well, you don't have an athlete, because the market is based on competition for titles. There's literally no sport in the world that's structured like mixed martial arts. There's absolutely none. And the truth and the reason why is because mixed martial arts itself is actually not a sport based on competition. And that's why there's no sport like it.
Yeah, that's very interesting to me, because it's a sport I love and it's a sport I want to believe in and I want to believe is real. But, I guess the real fight happens behind the curtain is basically what's going on.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, really, what athletes compete for is not, we don't compete to fight one another. We compete to fight for titles. We literally compete for titles. And that's pretty much how, hierarchically, it works like this. In any sport, the athletes compete for the titles, and at the end of the day, every other person competes for those athletes' services that compete for those titles. So, yes, when the promoter locks you into a contract and says you could only compete for their title, guess what? They're no longer competing against other promoters. for your services. They basically locked out competition.
This might be a
great deal of information right now for the people that's listening. I mean, that's exactly right.
This might be a stupid question, Carlos, and I kind of know the answer to this, but I just want to get you on record just because I want to hear it. What do you think of the Reebok deal, the UFC Reebok deal, and the way it affects fighters, trainers, coaches, sponsors, the whole shebang?
It's based on anti-competitive constraints, and it's basically, to me, it's Reebok taking advantage of antitrust violations or anti-competitive conduct that is pretty much putting them in a position where they are basically stealing from athletes. Their guys are getting hosed. Yes, there are some people who are for it, but to me, some of these athletes or those individuals just have a really bad case of Stockholm syndrome. In that, it's good enough for them, so they'll go with it. But at the end of the day, the deal itself is pretty much based on, from what I've learned and what I'm sure everyone will come to see and understand, that this deal is based on illegal market behavior. And at the end of the day, to me, the Reebok deal itself is illegal.
Yeah, and the people that are reaping the benefits and love the Reebok deal are those exact people that are holding the key per se to, the gate master or the gatekeeper, if you will.
Yeah, they're part. Those who are in cooperation with such a structure become part of the machinery. And yes, they really should be making $10 million a fight. But if they're willing to take $1 million a fight and they're happy with it, well, that's their choice. But at the end of the day, they are losing $9 million when they should be, making a lot more. And they are also holding their fellow athletes down, and in some cases, avoiding real competition. Because, you look at our best comparative sport being boxing, the amount of pay and revenues that's generated in that sport is based on there actually being a real market, an actual legitimate marketplace where athletes and every service provider associated with that athlete's competition for titles are basically, driving this market so that it's so huge. There's so much revenues flowing through it that everyone does well. To me, you have mixed martial arts, so the only guys outside of professional fighting, which the only comparison would be boxing, where they have to look for other jobs, other careers after they retire. Boxers don't do that. They just sit back, relax. They're like, hey, I did what I did as a professional athlete, and I'm gonna go ahead and continue working in my sport. Mixed martial artists don't have that option. They don't, and it's because of things like the Reebok deal and so forth that they're just they're at the end of the day they're destroying this sport that a lot of athletes have worked really hard to build, and a lot of these guys too, 10 years from now, are going to wish they did something different. Not that they're going to wish they didn't turn down the $1 million or something, but they're going to say to themselves, you know what, I really did deserve more. And
I mean, what you just said is exactly the question I was about to ask. What's the future for MMA fighters? What do you think it is?
They gotta have a good head on their shoulders, man, to answer that question. That's the future for MMA fighters. And the future is, if it stays the current way it is, that is the future. The future for MMA fighters is UFC, more UFC. It has nothing to do with them. And right now, if athletes, want there to be a future, it has to change. And you know what? The best way to change this is, yes, to me, the most obvious route was to do this through the courts, through the legal system, because it's patently exploitative. It's like, I basically said, wow, we should be suing for equal treatment and equal protection under the law as professional fighters, as prize fighters, as we are rightfully deserving of the same protections as boxers.
So do you think the Teamsters and the Culinary Workers Union is the answer? Can the fighters get by with just the Fighters Association? Or?
Yes, it'll be a Fighters Association. I believe a Fighters Association is a good thing, because fighters will have a voice to basically help mold and shape their sport. Because I know every fighter out there wants to basically earn as much money as they can in as safe of an environment as they can have. All right, and there's the only way that balance can be struck is by fighters, putting in their input. If you leave that up to a promoter, dude, we'll be half dead working for 10 cents on the dollar.
So Carlos, did you see last week? I think Brandon Beard posted a message he got from the UFC about telling the fighters, warning the fighters, say no to the unions. What's your take on that?
That's just a distraction from the real issues. The truth is, a union is not going to solve the fighters' problems. In fact, if the UFC gets a union, it strengthens their position. It strengthens their position in that they're just now a monopoly with a union. It's kind of like, they will just become a monopoly with their own union. It doesn't fix the problem. The problem is the antitrust violations. Those are the things that have to be addressed. And yes, possibly if we have a union, we have a stronger voice, to lobby Congress and so forth to change or to address the situation. To me, I don't believe it's a change in the law that's required. It's more the problem right now is the proper application of it and the current rules on the books that are not being applied. And to me, the Teamsters' effort to unionize the fighters and so forth is great. It gives the fighters a lot of leverage when it comes to certain issues. But a union in itself, without fixing the contractual violations and the anti-competitive restraints that they employ, is not going to change anything. It's just going to create a more stable situation for them as a monopoly. In that, now you have a union that's married to a monopoly, which is really two monopolies married together. And you think any other promoter or thing will be able to come in there and compete against them? No, it won't. They may be like a C level promotion, a B level, and an A level. But what's important is that those three promotions can always work together and agree on what they want to pay fighters, rather than those three promoters competing against one another for what they pay fighters. And that's what's missing. Competition between the promoters for the services of an athlete to compete for their titles. And right now, they're exclusive. They're the clause where you must fight exclusively for one title is a total violation of antitrust law, and that is really the problem. Guys got to realize you compete for titles, and if a promoter wants you to compete for their title, they have to bid on it. There's no sport in the world where the promoter has their own title and has exclusivity at the same time. It doesn't happen in tennis. It doesn't even happen in league sports. And that is something a lot of people don't understand. And with league sport, the title doesn't belong to a team. It belongs to the league, and the promoters are the teams. So when you compete for the Super Bowl, you're not competing for the Redskins title. You're not competing for the Sabres title. You're just competing for a title that does not belong to any one of those teams. And what's important about that is now the teams, if they want you to play on their team, they're going to bid for you. But you can change teams and still compete for the same title. Just like in boxing, you can change promoters and still compete for the same title. In MMA,
that was a very layman's way to kind of sum up the lawsuit.
The mechanism.
That spelled it out very well.
Yeah, that's how the mechanism works. In that, if you walk away from the UFC, all of a sudden you walked away from competition itself. Because when you walk away from them, you're not just walking away from the title, but you're walking away from all the athletes. You're walking away from the pool of athletes that compete for that title. So when you walk away from that title, you're not walking away from it. You're actually walking away from the chance to actually compete against John Jones, George St. Pierre, Carlos Newton. You're walking away from the opportunity to compete against these other great athletes of notoriety. And if you cannot compete as a top athlete against other top athletes, you're screwed. You're out of the competition. You're out of the competition.
No, I kind of know where you want to see this go, and of course I think you want it to change. But honestly, do you think that they can change in the dynamics that they're in currently, or do you believe if they change their, if you guys are successful with your lawsuit and there's federal laws changing and things, do you think that the promoter is, I don't want to say doomed because I don't think they would be, but do you think that
they wouldn't be?
Yeah, I don't think they would.
But what would happen to the sport is the sport would just grow. It'll grow to the level that boxing has grown to. It'll grow to a level where now the athletes themselves become a brand that can demand thousands, of fans to come to fill a stadium. The athlete's brand will grow to a level where, just John Jones alone as a headliner can fill the MGM. John Jones alone as a brand can demand, 1 million pay-per-view buys. That's what will happen to the sport. The athletes will actually gain in terms of their brand recognition and their notoriety and their drawing power as a entertainment, as a form of entertainment, as an entertainer. At the end of the day, right now, the way the sport is structured, it's just the UFC is the brand that sells, and they'll tell you that straight up. They'll make no qualms about it. And you know what? To me, those admissions just prove my point, right? When Ronda Rousey, if Ronda Rousey was a boxer, she would be able to demand a million pay-per-view buys just on her own, all right? And from there, promoters will have to compete for it. But if because the sport's not structured like that, Ronda Rousey is dependent on the UFC to make any buys at all, and because the public does not recognize enough the name Ronda Rousey to generate 1 million pay-per-view buys. They only recognize the word UFC. They don't even recognize the words MMA. On a mass scale, it's still the UFC.
Exactly.
That's the trick.
Great
That's
information.
Carlos, I was going to ask you, how different was Pride FC in terms of the way they treated the fighters compared to the way UFC treat fighters?
Well, I think part of Pride FC was, we're talking about Japan. So culturally, there was a lot of difference when it came to how they treat the fighters.
Exactly.
Also, a lot about how they treat the fighters was also based on competition. One of the things that really, really, really rang home for me, that kind of pretty much was my eureka moment. Was I imagined myself, imagine me being a boss of, like, I don't know, a food company or something, and I said to all my employees one day, walked out there and said, "You're all a piece of shit." How long would I have any employees for? You know,
Not
how
very
long
long.
would I have? How long would I have business? How long would I have a business, an established business network? It will all disappear within the next. And I realized, wow, these guys are actually getting worse in the way they treat athletes and treat the general public, treat industry service providers such as journalists and cutmen and managers and so forth. At the same time, their revenues and so forth are going up. I said the only way that happens is under duress and restraint. That's the only way that happens. And to me, because that was very, you know, that made everything very self-evident that, wow, this is a restraint. Because even when you don't want to work with them, you have to work with them. And it just became very self-evident. And the thing is, you know, a lot of guys worry about where the sport's going to go. This is where the sport's going to go. John Jones will become a bigger name than the UFC. Ronda Rousey will become a bigger name than the UFC. That's where the sport will go. In that Floyd Mayweather is a bigger name than the WBC or the WBA or the IBF. He's a bigger name than the titles he actually fights for. Because at the end of the day, it's the athletes that make the titles, not the titles make the athletes.
Amen.
I gotta.
Waylon Thacker coming at you again, man. You follow a lot of legends like Matt Hughes, Anderson Silva, Sakuraba. You know, you got some of the slickest BJJ inside of wrestling, not inside of mixed martial arts. Plus, you put wrestling with that. You know what I mean? So, like, what's your favorite fight between all the legends that you fought?
I like my fight between me and Pele. I love my fight with me and Anderson. I love my fight with me and Dan Henderson. You know.
Yeah.
I whenever I meet Dan, we always have a great smile, and we always exchange a good laugh. And you know, at the end of the day, too, it's just as we get older, it's great to look back and at these fights together, standing together in the same room, and go, "Oh, remember when you did that? Oh yeah, I was wondering, you know, I saw you move with that extra step. I felt it coming, but I got hit. You know, it's fun to like actually, you know, comment, you know, together and reflect on it together. You know, to me, it's a lifelong, you know, bond that will never be broken. You know, once you fought someone and competed. Because you really know that person on a whole different level.
Yeah, you really have the slickest BJJ I've ever seen, especially at that time. And whenever I saw you fight Renzo Gracie, he had you in like a knee bar, and you just got out of it like, you know, it wasn't even nothing. You know what I mean? Plus, you got some of the best reversals ever. Was that always like a given? But I don't think it's a given because you got to train for that stuff. But was you always like physically athletic and able to do stuff like that?
For me, it was more that I realized my trainers and me realized that I was faster than most people when it came to thinking on the fly and feeling what the next move should be. I do that really quickly. I'm very intuitively. I mean, I have a very good feel for martial arts. You know, I have a very good awareness level when it comes to, you know, what's the next move. And as long as if the guy pushed it to a certain pace where you could no longer think about it like you do chess and just kind of like do it like you do boxing, just let the punches fly, just let the moves flow, I would find myself at an advantage because most people just couldn't keep up with the field, couldn't keep up with the flow. You know, and,
it looked like you had a lot of respect for him, though, because like back in Pride Rules and what's it called show, I can't pronounce it right now, Shoido or something like that. Like it looked like he was in side control, and you could throw a knee down in the face, but I think you respected him enough because of the martial arts background that you just thought about, and he was like, nah, I respect this guy so much that, you know, I'm just going to continue to have this great MMA match, you know what I mean? Like, it was beautiful. I even like how the Japanese crowd applaud as, like, every transition was made. Like, as in America, they'd be booing or, you know, all kinds of other stuff. I really like the Japanese crowd when it comes to mixed martial arts.
Oh, no, and for that, you know, I think every fighter loves, or every fighter should experience it at least once to fight in Japan. It's truly an incredible experience. And, you know, they, again, for me, they truly love martial arts and mixed martial arts. And I think that was a big part of it, too, in that working over in Japan, to me, it was a lot easier to negotiate and so forth because they also, out of respect for their sport, were much more willing to give you what you deserve. You know, and were more of the sense that we work together and build this sport together. You know, and you know, because for us, it's more than just a sport. It's also a part of our culture.
Yeah.
Hey, Carlos, I want to know real quick. How did you meet Rob and the game of phone tag that you guys played? I heard was legendary before he realized who you were. Can you take us through that a little bit?
You know, well, the truth was Rob wasn't the first person I called. I actually ended up talking to a bunch of people, and eventually, you know, the Mixed Martial Arts Fighters Association just kind of caught my attention at some point. Some of the guys mentioned it, and I looked into it. I saw who was you know, a founder of the association, and I said, let me call this gentleman. You know, I read some of his stuff on the website, and I realized, I think he's pointing to something, the same thing I'm pointing to. You know, at that time there wasn't so much open discussion about it, but you know, I could read between the lines basically. I said, you know what, let me call this person, and we just kept playing phone tag. You know, I think I dropped probably a few key words that made him say, maybe I should call this person, you know. he might know what he's talking about, and you know, and hear him out. And eventually, you know, when we connected, he basically said, "You're right. You're absolutely right." And because I really, guys, I put my finger on it, and that is the truth. The truth of that is, there's no form of commerce or even sport where an athlete is restrained to a title. It doesn't happen in any way, because the way the MMA is structured, it's supposed to be structured more like tennis. If a promoter wants to have their own title, if a promoter wants to have their own title, they cannot have exclusive contracts. If a promoter wants exclusive contracts, the title must belong to a separate entity, an independent decision-making body, which in most cases in prize fighting sports is either an athletic commission or is in the present day the sanctioning bodies. And that's why in prize fighting there's a license for sanctioning bodies in prize fighting. Like the WBC is actually licensed by the Athletic State Commission. And the neat thing is, the Athletic State Commission could suspend the WBC's license without causing even one hiccup in the sport of boxing.
Right.
All right. But imagine the Athletic Commission suspended the UFC's promotional license.
Oh,
dude,
Jesus, that'd be...
the sport of mixed martial arts would shut. Their revenues for mixed martial arts would dry up. That's a huge conflict of interest.
You know what, Carlos? I hear you have another agenda in life to become. Well, I hear you that you have a real love for barbecue, but that kind of throws a wrench in your desire to become a human camel. Is that correct? That you eat for 8 days or 8 meals and then you fast for 3? I mean, that kind of throws a little bit of a wrench into it. You can't do both, my man.
No, man. I have a desire for barbecue because I'm like a serial entrepreneur, and I want to open a restaurant. And if I do it good enough, I can open a chain of restaurants. And
I'll be visiting.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know about the other fighters, but I think I have a good head on my shoulders, and I'm going to use it. And opening a restaurant is just something I'm really interested in doing. It's a fun thing to do, if you have a family that's into that type of thing, and also a great place to bring people together, watch some fights on a Saturday night, and enjoy some good ribs. It's for me, it's just a great thing.
Listen, man, I'm getting told in my other ear that we got to start wrapping up here, but I want to give you an opportunity to let people know where they can find you on Twitter, Facebook, wherever, Pinterest, wherever it may be. And before we let you go, Carlos, what are you doing now? What's next for Carlos outside of the lawsuit and things like that? What are you focusing on now? Do you have any new ventures going?
I'm getting ready to open a new school, and that'll be open in 2016. I'm into land development and other business ventures. I love to design and build houses and properties. That's a real passion of mine. And I love teaching. I work with our First Nations people, our Aboriginal people up here in Canada, our Aboriginal communities, and have a great time doing youth development, inspiring these young men and women to go out there in the real world and fight for what they deserve, and fight for their future, basically, and overcome any past struggles they may have, and make this place a better world for everyone.
Awesome.
That's what drives me.
One more question for you. For the new MMA fans that really, want to know about how you started MMA, when did you start MMA? In a quick nutshell.
I started as a professional. I started when I was 18. Mm-hmm. And, as a martial artist, I started much younger than that. And to me, MMA started when I gave up the idea of having a style. To me, mixed martial arts wasn't about whether I was a karate practitioner or BJJ practitioner. To me, mixed martial arts was just about win. Can you win? Can you enter the same ring with anyone and win? And I think I started becoming a mixed martial artist when I let go of labels and I some type of identity that I can call myself, and really just go in there and be in the moment, let it flow, and just let the awareness guide me and find a path to victory. To me, mixed martial arts isn't just about something I do when I'm in the cage or the ring. To me, mixed martial arts is something I live my life by.
And that's why you're a legend. That's exactly why you're a legend. Former UFC middleweight champion. I remember that bulldog choke you pretty much got on Pat Miletich. They called it the schoolyard choke or whatever. That was great right there. Did you improvise that, or was that just like, you just want to take his head off?
And right there in the matchup, I kind of knew I would have an opportunity, but the actual final form it took, I didn't know. I just kind of let it happen the way it wanted to happen. And just kind of worked with it. I didn't try to fight it. It just happened.
That was actually voted the top 20 of greatest submissions in UFC history. Carlos, I got that on my wall. Final question for you. Did Matt Hughes in UFC 34, did Matt Hughes pass out when he was in your triangle?
Of course he passed out.
He passed out. Matt would tell you.
He admitted it.
Yeah, he admitted it too. He passed out. And, sometimes I look back and said, I was such a good Boy Scout. I listened to John McCarthy and let go of the cage when I very well told John at the time, he's going to pass out. And he'd said, Carlos, let go. I was like, dude, this is going to suck. And the minute I let go, I just totally hit my head. And I said, you know what the first thing was when I hit my head too? One of the first things I thought was, I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much, yeah.
Carlos, when you got your first win with Eric Paulson, and Eric, by the way, is first American to win the World Light Heavyweight Judo title in Japan. And,
Awesome.
he was actually the striking coach for Team Lesnar on the Ultimate Fighter 13. How was that feeling when you beat him in the submission armbar about 2-0?
Oh, boy.
And that was
me,
after your first fight with David and Goliath. The guy come in at 100 pounds, John Rivera. How was that going into that fight, being a 100-pound underdog?
You know what? At the time when I won those fights, I was more in the state of mind of, you know, don't get swept away by this. Don't think you're hot shit. You know, stay grounded. And it's taken me many years. You know, it's almost taken me almost 2 decades later to really comprehend what happened and, you know, grasp the significance of, you know, those moments, you know, in terms of what it meant to both me and my opponent, you know, and also what it meant to our sport, you know, that those fights took place. You know, it takes a little while, you know, to understand something like that. And because Eric is an awesome fighter, man. He's an awesome martial artist. So, you know, to understand what I did back then, I wasn't at that level of experience and knowledge to really, you know, or that level of life experience to really comprehend what was going on.
Yeah. Carlos, listen, man, I really appreciate you coming on, and I'm sorry that I cut you off there. I thought you were done, so I apologize to you, man. Listen, before I let you go, would you let everybody know where they can find you on Twitter, Facebook, any social medias you might have, anything like that?
You know, guys can catch me at warriormma.com or warriormma.ca and go on our Facebook page and just post, and that's where you can find me.
Cool. Listen, Carlos, can we get you back on as this lawsuit in the legal battle rages on and there's new stuff to talk about? Can we get you back on here, Carlos?
Yeah, for sure. It'd be a pleasure. More than willing.
Awesome, man. Carlos, I really appreciate you coming on with us tonight and spending just about an hour. So I appreciate you talking with us and kind of walking us through your journey, man. Good luck to you, and I wish you nothing but the best, my friend.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Awesome.